Kabuki is the only performance arts which label itself traditional, which is also economically successful. The first very early Kabuki would perform on no stages without any props to attract customers to. They worked in brothels. Kabuki mono is often likened to the punks or the Yankees. They dress in flamboyant fashion, and anti-establishment performances were banned because the fans were fighting too much.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, subscribing is the best way to support us. It helps us grow and bring you new stories from life in Japan. All right, let's jump in. Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and I have the pleasure to welcome Tove Bjoerk to the podcast today. Thank you so much for coming to our studio.
Thank you for having me.
You're a professor at the Graduate School of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Saitama, where you specialize in early modern Japanese literature, and you have an extensive background in Kabuki. So we have a lot of topics to get into and quite a discovery of Kabuki to go through today. I'm very excited about it because I know very little about this art form here in Japan. But before we dive into Kabuki, maybe I want to hear a little bit more about your background and what brought you to Japan in the first place.
What brought me to Japan in the first place was a very generous scholarship from the Monkasho in Japan. I did my master in international law in Finland back in the year 2000. That field of study did not suit me at all. So I traveled, I worked in bars and restaurants, etc. for a couple of years. I then also moved to Berlin and was there for a couple of years. And there I started thinking that I could also do something with my brain except remembering the code for ordering caipirinha for the guests. So I figured that I could study something. And I wanted to do art history, actually. And then I enrolled for art history, but you need to have 2 majors in Germany.
Okay.
So what to take for the other one? And I wasn't really sure about anything. But then on the bus one day, there was this girl, probably a German girl, who was reading a manga in Japanese. And I got immediately very jealous of her.
Oh.
Because why can she read that and I can't read that? And I have this thing with languages. I like to understand what's going on. So then I figured that I might as well learn the language then. And in that sense, I got into studying the Japanese language first. 2 years later, I got a scholarship. They sent me to Rikyū University in Tokyo. And long story short, I ended up doing my PhD there 10 years after I was first sent out.
So an encounter on a bus, seeing someone reading a manga kind of changed your trajectory quite significantly.
Yes. And that's, I wish there would be a better story to this because I'm always asked this, but that's the honest truth what happened.
Having kind of grown up in Finland and then spending some time in Germany, and suddenly you arrive in Japan, what was that experience like for you to kind of go in this completely different context, which you didn't seem to have really considered beforehand?
Yes. I had Japanese friends also in while I was living in Germany. I wasn't unaware of or completely uninterested in the Japanese culture, but I didn't have it in my life plan to actually live in Japan. It wasn't on the map. I came here for the very first time in 2003 because one of my Japanese friends invited me. And I found it, very weird. For example, in restaurants, the father of the family, in order to call the attention to waiters, would shout "Sumimasen," which would be an absolute death sentence if any guest would do that in a German restaurant. You would get killed. So, and I found this kind of this different approach to various things very amusing and very funny. But then I moved in 2004 to actually study here, which was a bit overwhelming. The lack of space. Because there are no gaps between the houses.
And in Finland, you've got a few kilometers between houses.
Yes, and also if you live in Berlin, like there's space between houses. There is parks where you can sit down. There is space in a different manner. So this lack of space was kind of oppressive first, but once you get used to it, it's kind of cozy somehow.
You kind of found your little niche, your little kind of
But yeah, that was basically the first impression, I'd say.
So you went there to study at Rikkyu
Yes,
University. Was this
yes.
like an exchange program
Yeah,
or?
it was an exchange program. And while there, I mean, I did want to do something with art or literature and so on. And I did attend various classes on, I don't know, more classical literature and then also modern literature. But for some reason, this early modern field, the professor there also he was a really funny guy,
Mhm.
Professor Watanabe Kenji. I think he's kind of well known in certain circles. I had very entertaining and amusing classes always, and I kind of became a disciple, a follower of this teacher, and he then also accepted me for the graduate school later on. So
Wow. Did you already think at the time that it's a country you'd like to stay in and live for much longer? Or was this just still, well, I'll be here as an exchange student, I'll study, I'll learn something, and then maybe go back to Europe?
I was here for 1 year, and I joined in order to. I have this thing with languages. So I start speaking a language usually very quickly,
Hmm.
even though I have incomplete background knowledge and I can't speak it properly, but I still speak. But with Japanese, that wasn't so easy for me.
Hmm.
It would be with Spanish or Italian or French or German or whatever. You just start speaking at some point. So I had this really big threshold for starting to speak to people for the first 3 weeks. So I joined a theater group at the university. I mean, I was at the time 29 years old and they were 19, 10 years younger. They're still my best friends, but they kind of gave me I should say, sparring partner, people to
Hmm.
fight with, to have real conversation with, because a lot of the student activities that's specially catering for foreign students is very focused on the foreignness. They're
Oh, I
interested in
see.
you as a foreigner. So you don't get into you don't become friends because you have a hobby in common and so on. It's kind of like that. So I joined that, and then I got kind of hooked on theater things. And then during this time also, I was figuring that I might actually want to do this professionally. I mean,
Oh,
study, do research professionally. And I consulted Professor Watanabe, and he knew that I was doing this theater thing. And he was like, well, if you like theater, why don't you try to do something with the diary of Ichikawa Danjuro II? I opened it, understood nothing, but found it intriguing and think that, okay, I'll give it a try. So then I decided to stay on for a second year. I didn't have a scholarship or anything, so I didn't study very much. I mostly worked Baito and then tried to read this diary. Um, and I went back to Germany, consulted my professor at the Humboldt University, and he said that you have a master in the baggage. You don't need to do an extra master in order to enter the PhD program. So I entered the PhD program first in Germany once, got a new scholarship, and came back.
I see.
And then it was pretty clear that if I want to do this research, I really need to be here. And this 1 year I was back in Europe, everything is so difficult in Europe once you're used to living in Japan.
Yes,
You
it
know,
is. I
you have
know.
to do everything on your own. And so I realized that I'm now unable to live properly anywhere else, except in the land with the heated toilet seats.
You,
Sorry,
s-
bad
you
joke.
you said that you got hooked on the theater thing.
Yeah,
What was it that kind of interested you in theater? And also in Japan, there's different kind of theaters. There's
yeah,
no
yeah,
kabuki puppet theater.
yeah.
Which one was
I,
it that interested you?
the group I was active in was Angura Theater,
Mm-hmm.
which is we did all sorts of weird things. But the whole theatrical process, I don't know exactly what got me hooked, but I think it's the human aspect, because when you create a show, there is so many things that has to happen at the same time and so many people that have to kind of come together for it to happen. And this very human thing, this interaction that everybody's kind of working towards getting this end goal
Mm-hmm.
together. I mean, it becomes a community. Each stage that you work with becomes a community, and that felt, when you're a foreigner in Japan, be a part of that progress felt really, really reassuring, and it was a lot of fun. Was that maybe?
It's your teacher then, Watanabe Sensei, who recommended you to do a research on Ichikawa Danjuro II and study his diary. This is extremely specific.
Yes.
I have basically two questions. One is, who is Ichikawa Danjuro II? And also, why did he recommend you to study this diary in particular?
Okay, I'm going to start with the second question because the reason was that there had been a document collection published about Ichikawa Danjuro II from the Rikyo University. And in this, the diary was included. But there's been no proper research done about it up until the date. And he had been involved in the process of publishing this collection of documents. So when it comes to theater, that popped into his mind quite randomly, I think. I don't think he had a master plan. He just works very much on instinct. Ichikawa Danjuro II, our current Danjuro is generation 13. So he was the big star of Kabuki in the early part of the 18th century. He was born in 1688 and died in 1758. His stage career spanned over 60 years. He enacted, I've counted them, I don't remember the exact number, but 350 something different roles. And he was, I mean, his father, Danjuro I, he was famed for being the creator of Aragoto acting, the acting technique for depicting superheroes or gods with superhuman powers, etc. This very bombastic acting style, which was mostly popular in Edo. Danjuro I, however, was murdered when he was 44 years old and left Danjuro II fatherless at 16. And in the world of Kabuki back then, as it is today, and as anybody who has seen the film Kokuho probably knows, not having your father as backing in the world of Kabuki is really harsh. So, but the murderer of Danjuro I was another Kabuki actor who belonged to the school of an actor called Ikushima Shingoro, who was the great master of erotic roles. He was the sexy man on stage in the day, in around about 1710s, like there, 1704 to 1710. So he kind of took on young Danjuro II, let him act his younger brother on stage and so on. And then Shingoro got involved in a very big scandal in 1714. He was exiled from Edo, and from that part onwards, Danjuro II became the lead manager, trying to kind of tie the whole world of Kabuki together, because we are now in the middle of the Kyoho reforms. There's a huge economic recession on, and all the theaters are struggling. So he doesn't only like successfully enact things on stage. He does the whole behind the scenes wheeling and dealing to get like the whole world running. He was, after his death, like revered by the whole world of Kabuki as like one of the key pillars to actually make the theaters push through that particular bit of recess that they had. And before, you have to stop me, because when I start talking about the Kyoho period, I get very tedious and it's very long. So let me just say that he was one of the key figures in establishing Kabuki, the business model of Kabuki, and stabilizing it so that it could survive up until well, basically today.
Yeah.
So,
did I understand it correctly that he went in apprenticeship with the murder of his own father?
Not the murderer, but the teacher of
the murderer.
Because the teacher felt responsible for his disciple's action. So he kind of adopted him, helped him out. Sorry, my bad, I wasn't explaining.
And so then he went on to basically establish the Kabuki that would last throughout the centuries. So maybe I think now is a good time for people that are maybe not too familiar with Kabuki, but may have heard the term, may have seen the masks and the white paintings. How exactly do we define Kabuki theater today? What makes it special, if we kind of talk in like broad terms?
The most special thing about Kabuki is the business model. Kabuki is the only, to my knowledge, performance arts which label itself traditional, which is also economically successful. All traditional performance arts, opera, ballet, no, kyogen, whatever, you name it, they need state support to survive. There isn't one opera house in the world who doesn't get subsidies from the state, or
Wow.
philharmonic or classical music, etc. Um, Kabuki does get support from the state, but it would survive without it. I mean, it's got the whole shoshku behind it. It's a multi-million, multi-billion dollar. I don't know the exact, but it makes money. And
And this is what
how?
he established, basically.
Yes, and how it makes money is that it produces successful shows. And how to be successful? You produce things that people will have. So kabuki isn't an aesthetic concept. It is the method of giving people what they want on
Interesting.
stage. So the early modern productions, I mean, they needed to cater to a very large a variety of potential spectators. You have the members of the bakufu and their families, the high educated, the elites, and then you have the people who work in shops and are maybe illiterate even, and you cater to them all. You have a huge variety, a wide range of content, basically.
It is my understanding that historically, at the very beginning, it was
Mm.
actually for the poor, and it was one of the first art forms that was kind of created for the normal people and not for the court or for the imperial court at the time.
Well, yes, it was kind of, it stemmed from this subculture called kabuki monos. A kabuki mono is often likened to the punks or the Yankees. I mean, they're kind of a bit outlaws. They dress in flamboyant fashion and anti-establishment. So they have these big parties. I often compare them to, I don't know, the ravers in the 90s. That's how they behaved. And from that, gradually, mimicking them on stage became a thing. The first star of kabuki was a woman called Okuni, who dressed up as this kabuki mono on stage. She was very successful. Other people copied that, but to call it a stage art for the poor is a truth with modification. But because pretty early on, I mean, Okuni herself, she was invited to perform in the imperial court.
Mm-hmm.
And the actors, of course, actively sought wealthy patrons. They wanted the rich and the wealthy to come to the theaters. And if you look at old folding screens, you see from kabuki theaters, in the early kabuki theaters in Kyoto, people wearing them juni hitoe kimonos, like the court ladies' attire, etc. But they also needed, I mean, it was open to anyone who could pay the entrance fee. So that meant that it was economically egalitarian. Because the early modern period, you were born into a social class, and this social class was, I mean, of course, you could actually sell and buy them later on in the period, but that was kind of something that was very difficult to change with your own hands. But economic powers, especially here in Osaka, this is very prevalent. You could actually improve your economy, or you could affect how much money you have by working, by improving yourself. That's something that you can actually affect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So the kabuki theaters catered to whoever could pay. No and Kyogen, they catered to the warrior class. They were limited to one social class. And this is less about economic power, but about social status. Kabuki, in that sense, also catered to not necessarily poor, because you had to pay the entrance fee, but to everybody.
I see.
So
to cater to everybody that can pay is one thing. You also mentioned that what they succeeded at doing is getting everyone interested and doing shows that people wanted to watch. So what are those shows that people came for and that were performed on the stage, which also has a lot of unique things to itself?
Yeah, so from the artistical point of view, there is, of course, the visual, first of all, the visual impact of a kabuki performance. So you would have like the first very early kabuki would perform on no stages without any props or so on. And the first actors, their main purpose on standing on stage was to attract customers. They worked in brothels usually, both men and women. So, but then after these kind of performances were banned because the fans were fighting too much, not because the Bakufu had any issues with prostitution. I mean, they actively gave licenses to the brothel districts at the same time. So, but then the world of Kabuki had to make people come to the theaters anyways to see shows performed by only Ossan, male grown-up people. Then you need to perform shows that has a storyline. And for that, you need to have special experts who can enact the female roles, who can enact the warrior roles, who can enact the lovely young man of a fine house. So you need to have like experts doing the different parts. So the acting technique vastly developed. And with that, the need for stage machinery. I mean, because people wanted to see spectacles. So the Kabuki theaters always experimented with incorporating the very latest in technical expertise, the very latest in fashion. And then to that, they took source material that would be known to the audience, like heroes from the wars between the Heike and the Genji. You would take these characters and make spin-offs on their storylines. Very often they would also just steal the storylines performed in Bunraku or Ningyo Jori at the same time, because they had better stories usually anyways. But then they would make them appear on stage in the flesh, so to speak, and very lavish costumes. And then also, as the theater, as buildings also grew more and more stable and bigger, the use of stage lift, of the revolving stage, of flying mechanisms, of water gadgets, etc., was really heavily. I mean, they used everything in their toolbox. And they kept on doing this. Kabuki never defined itself as tradition, except in the sense of being a family business.
Okay.
Hereditary, because the acting names, they were passed down from father to son, and they wanted to be seen as townsmen or as artisans who also had this tradition of passing on their so-called kage, or the family business.
Was this always biologically, or as it's kind of also common in Japan, just like adopted sons?
Adopted. Was biologically, preferably if you had a son, but when you didn't, also by marriage or by adoption. Danjuro II himself did not have a son. He adopted Danjuro III. So,
how widespread was Kabuki throughout history? If we kind of think in like numbers of theaters that were kind of present, was it one major theater per large city, or were they kind of a little bit everywhere?
So Kabuki is predominantly an urban phenomenon. So in Edo, in the beginning, early Edo period, there was a lot of different theaters, but it stabilized into three core theaters. First four, but the big scandal in 1714 took out one of those theaters. And there were three theaters the Nakamura-sa, the Ichimura-sa, the Morita-sa theater, who could then, in the case of their insolvency, when they got economically in trouble, be replaced by three replacement theaters. And then there were in Osaka, there were at Dotonbori, I think, at one point 11 Kabuki theaters and several, I don't have the number of Ningyo Jori theaters. Dotonbori had loads and loads of theaters. And in Kyoto too, the number of theaters varied. And why this number is fixed in Edo and why it's more fluent here in the Kamigata area is because these licenses to operate a theater in Edo, it became hereditary. In Kamigata, it was a tradable commodity, so they were sold and I mean, if a theater was unsuccessful, somebody else would buy the license and then open the theater again. But very soon, also theaters, like permanent theaters, you find them in Kanazawa, for example. In Hakodate would have one. You would have them in on Shikoku, the famous Kompirasa, which is still there today. But Kabuki spread to throughout the whole of the country, very often through traveling theater companies and then also local village theater companies who copied the arts of the big cities. So towards the end of the Edo period, there was kind of this nationwide phenomenon, which is for the first time in the Japanese history, you have a cultural medium which everybody in the whole society kind of share. If you say the word Chushingura to anybody during the late Edo period, I don't know, a kitchen maid in Aomori and I don't know, the guards of the shogun's palace would equally know about it, though maybe the kitchen maid hasn't seen it, but she knows it through prints or through books or through like somebody, maybe the local theater company putting it up. So now, so sorry, I start rambling now, but yeah. So actual, I mean, you have these actual fixed theaters, and then you have temporary theaters, which very often are these traveling theater companies use. But a very important venue for kabuki is actually the private stages.
Oh.
Because kabuki actors were often invited to a feudal lord's estate or the houses of wealthy people to perform at, I don't know, birthday parties, etc. And this became a very important source of income for the actors. These private stages, and I mean, you have a lot of amateur productions. Right now, I'm reading the diary of a feudal lord, Yanagisawa Nobutoki, and he starts after he's retired writing his own plays and making his retainers and his ladies in waiting and his family enact it, and they build a proper stage in the estates here.
Wow.
So, sorry, I'm talking too much.
No, it's fascinating. I'm curious about the style, because I imagine these main theaters in Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, they have budget for, you mentioned, these kind of complex stages with mechanisms, but elsewhere in Japan, maybe not, especially the traveling ones. Has this affected the style of kabuki? Would the plays be very different from one area to the other, or was it generally consistent throughout Japan?
I mean, they really did their best to mimic the stage machinery also in the countryside.
Okay.
There is a very fascinating place in Gunma called Kamimihara. I think that's the name of the place. I might be mistaken, where they have one of the early modern theaters used by both local productions and traveling theater companies there. And it's got a revolving stage. It's got the stage lifts. It's got like it even got features that the main theaters didn't have, because the person who built this theater, he traveled to Osaka extra to study the stage mechanics. I mean, Osaka really had is the city for where most of these really spectacular stage mechanics first developed, because here there was a huge corpus of expertise in practical matters.
I want to go back to Ichikawa Danjuro II.
Yes.
So your professor recommends you to study the book, and you said earlier in our conversation that, well, you had a first look, but you couldn't really understand what was going on. Now you just mentioned that you're reading the diaries of another lord or actor, which has kind of become part of your academic studies. But at the time, what do you see, or what are you looking at when, without so much knowledge as you have today, you start reading at these diaries written in maybe more ancient Japanese? What do you discover there that was like so fascinating for you that today you're still studying those?
I mean, the bits that I did understand, you see mentioning of a whale somewhere, and then there's definitely somebody drunk over here, and he's losing his shoes on this day. Why does he write about that? And then there is a lot of poetry. I don't know what to do with that. And then he writes suddenly about like receiving food. Why does he write about that? So I started picking up on various topics that were recurrent, and I made lists of, like, for example, what does he write about food? What does he write about medicine? What does he write about alcohol and tobacco? What does he write about, I don't know, the pleasure quarters? I made like them into separate categories. And first of all, this really didn't have anything to do with Kabuki. He writes almost nothing about what happens on stage.
Oh, interesting.
He writes about the dealings with when there is a fight at the theater, the payment is late, he hasn't gotten his wages, and the actors are angry, or I don't know. And he writes sometimes about the spectators. Oh, this famous daimyo so and so came to see us, or I got this gift sent to me backstage by lady so and so. So I started collecting like this pattern of behavior, and then from that, considering the reality of kabuki productions at the time. As problem, how should we say, extension thereof, realized I also have to deal with kabuki as a stage art, and I also started watching kabuki and doing research of like the aesthetics on what's happening on stage. But I really started from the everyday life. It was like having like access, like a looking glass. You have access.
The behind the scenes.
Yeah, a little bit like that, and that, I don't know. I suppose I'm a very nosy person. That you kind of.
It must be fascinating, though, to be able to kind of see basically that period through that person's writing.
Yeah.
Are these now translated into English if people are interested in reading?
Not. It's the diary itself is not translatable because you know, it's a diary. I mean, there are different kinds of diaries produced. Diaries that are produced in order for a third person to read. Very many of these diaries exist in Japan, but this is purely like he wrote. It's like notes, remembrance. It's not coherent. It doesn't have a storyline. So there is a lot of names and places, and like mention is that even I know like what, I don't know what to begin with that. So if you would transport this into English, you would need to contextualize everything. So I could rewrite it, I don't know, as a historical novel maybe at some point. But as a translation of a pure translation of the text, I don't think that would bring much for anybody. But people who are interested in the content of the diary, I mean, I have published in English too. My main publication is still in my main publication is in Japanese, the comprehensive analysis of everything I've done so far, but parts of it has also been published in English, so that exists.
Do you remember the first kabuki play you went to see?
Yes. I didn't know what the play was until I asked a friend. Like I said, that there was this weird light spear in it, and then lightning rod in it, and then they suddenly took out their mobile phone and did something with that. And he said, "Oh, that was Jiraiya." So
okay.
So there is that play is actually going to be performed in January at the Embujo Theater in Tokyo. And basically, there was this kind of superhero, late Edo period, who his superpower was to manipulate frogs. His name was Jiraiya. And those who are familiar with Naruto, the Naruto narrative, the Naruto narrative is based on the Jiraiya mono of the late Edo period. And there is, of course, also Kabuki based on the same novels. And it's very weird. People run around doing magic. And as it is in Kabuki, you have this kind of gakuyaochi when you suddenly are dropped into like here and now, and the actors speak directly to the audience, like the disappearance of the fourth wall. And the Jiraiya play has a lot of that going on. And I had no idea what I was watching. I saw it at the Minamisa Theater in Kyoto, actually. My mother was visiting, and we saw it together. And we were just sitting there, like thinking that what's going on, and like trying to figure out, like spun our own storyline. After it all ended, we turned the leaflet that we've been given over, and there was actually an English translation explanation on the backside. But we had fun, so.
I think this is one of the challenges
Mm.
a lot of foreigners face when they go watch Japanese theater in
Yeah.
general for the first time, whether it's kabuki, no, or bunraku,
Mm.
to understand what is going on. There are like interesting sounds, the costumes, the
Mm.
play. What would you recommend people do before going, or what they can do to have a better enjoyment or appreciation for the art when they go for the first time?
Yes, depends a little bit of what type of theater goer you are.
Hmm.
For most people, you kind of would like to know what the story is about, and you would like to know why things are happening. Now, one thing with traditional theater is logic is a very overestimated tool for understanding. But one thing that you can do is, first of all, read up on the play beforehand. Some of them, those who have been in in the repertoire, have really good English. Explanations, both provided by the National Theatre of Japan. So if you even Google the name of the play, sometimes you get like explanation of the
Hmm.
outline, the storyline of the play with pictures provided by the National Theatre of Japan. Then there is also this database which is produced by one of the great American kabuki scholars, Leitner, called Kabuki 21, which also provide this basic information
Hmm.
for a lot of the acts. But if and then you can do this in addition to, or how shall we say, mm, only do that. There is a company called Earphone Guide Company who produces various aids to the theater. Sometimes it's kind of this transmitter that you hear a commentary simultaneously with the stage. These days, it's more commonly that you get a device in which subtitles
I see.
appear. And I also work with producing these things, so I'm not now like I'm not pushing the products of this company, but it is a good help if you want to know what's going on, and they're not expensive. But what they do is, of course, distract you from the stage a little bit. So if you have the very artistic type who really enjoys music, who really enjoys just like immersing yourself in the visuality, I the visual impact, I actually just go to the theater, sit down, and see what happens. It depends on what type you are as a theater goer.
Researching the plays, one thing people can
Mm.
do. Are there a set number of plays, or is it like that are
Oh, no,
historically
no, no.
defined, or are troops coming up with new
Oh,
plays
yes.
today? And
Yes. So there is a traditional repertoire, which I don't know the exact number, but it's kind of vast. I think No has about 300 kind of set plays,
Mhm.
which are still alive in the repertoire. In both Bunraku and Kabuki, this is much more. But in Kabuki, I mean, Kabuki defined itself as traditional theater first once in the Meiji Restoration. This was kind of a demarcation towards the Western theater, that we are traditional Japanese theater, like defining itself
Mhm.
against the new foreign arts coming in. But at the same time, Kabuki kept on experimenting with new techniques. Like there were many collaboration in the 1930s between the film techniques and acting with humans at the same time, and so on. But after the Second World War, Kabuki was once forbidden
Mhm.
because I mean, it's commercial theater. It stages what people want to see. So, of course, in the pre-war and during the war, it had also staged a lot of propaganda plays because
Oh.
that's the mood. That is what people are paying to see. And then also, it was considered by the American occupational forces that it fostered feudal spirit. I mean, there are places where you're
Mm.
supposed to sacrifice yourself for your master. There are also places where you certainly are not doing that. But, anyways, so kabuki was forbidden. But within the same occupational forces, there were several people who really liked kabuki, really loved kabuki, and they were saying, "No, no, 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 no. Kabuki is traditional Japanese theater. It has to be allowed because it's tradition. So it was then allowed again with the premise that it must be traditional. So for the following like 20, 30 years, Kabuki was very traditional. It performed only like only established repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
Or authors such as Mishima Yukio would write new plays, but in the old style.
I see.
But from the 1980s, late 1980s, for example, Ichikawa Ennosuke reinvented kabuki as super kabuki using pre-recorded music and lightning, like musical style lightning, etc. Also cooperating with Chinese Peking opera artists, etc. And from that time onwards, ever increasingly, especially since the 2010s, we have something called Shinsaku Kabuki being extremely popular. This is then Kabuki takes as its fodder, for example, One Piece or Naruto or Kimetsu no Yaiba or Kase no Tani no Nausicaa or Final Fantasy, the game has been made into kabuki.
Wow.
That is now really popular. And I mean, this month, and then they also do kabuki performances of kind of contemporary playwrights, such as right now on the kabuki stage, there is Mitani Kabuki going on. And 2 months ago in Kyoto, Lupin Sansei Kabuki production was on stage. That's actually was performed first in Tokyo 2 years ago. But anyway, so this is really trending now. And to that, there is something called Cho Kabuki. Which is the brand name created by the kabuki actor Nakamura Shido. And he collaborates with NTT and their virtual idols. So he collaborates with Hatsune Miku. Hatsune Miku appears as a persona on stage and plays a role in kabuki. And he's done this for 10 years now. So this next month, December, is actually the 10-year anniversary of this kind of Chokabuki collaboration, and Hatsune Miku and Shido and everybody's going to do a very elaborate show on the Kabuki-sa stage. And these things you can see without any prior knowledge, I promise.
So in a way, they're staying true to what you're explaining before. They are doing what the people want to watch.
Yes, I think, I mean, right now it's really easy for me to explain to my student what kabuki is in the early modern period, because I can just like point to the latest flyer. That's what they were doing. Because it became this kind of highbrow art, partly by intent, because the social state of kabuki actors was really low during the early modern period, and they really actively tried to get them to become accepted as merchant or as craftsmen even. And in the Meiji Restoration, they went for tradition and high art, and they wanted to see kabuki equal to the Western theater.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of succeeded. They got invited to perform in front of the emperor, etc. That going on the one hand, all this innovative stuff is also going on. So the one doesn't exclude the other one, except for this kind of 30 years around or after the Second World War.
Have we seen kabuki playwrights kind of take on Western stories, like take a kabuki version of Hamlet?
Yes. There's been several kabuki performances by a stage director called Ninagawa. He put on the 12th Night of Shakespeare as kabuki performance. Falstaff has been made as Bunraku. They do experiment with Western playwrights occasionally, but I know that Othello has been made as kabuki too. I had the opportunity to speak to Tanosuke, Sawamura Tanosuke the sixth, an Onagata actor who actually participated in this performance. and he found it so embarrassing to run around with this Shakespeare like the round
Yeah,
trousers
yeah,
and
yeah.
whatever. But yeah, they did that.
What are some of your favorite kabuki plays?
I the thing is, I can tell you, I can pinpoint which is my absolute least favorite play. That's a
Oh,
play called Genroku Chushingura,
okay.
which is a nightmare. It's so boring. It's so boring. It's so boring. It's you can read it as a text. As a text, it's probably good, but it's nothing that you need to see on stage. But I mean, I like a good show. So plays that have a lot of movements. Like I do love the Jiraiya, the very first play that I saw. I do. I also like the Shinsaku productions. But if I had to choose just one play out of the kabuki repertoire, uh, which means something to me, it would be the play Skeroku and the Flowers of Edo, as it's often translated it. This is a play designed by Danjuro II. Here he merges bombastic aragoto acting with the softer wagoto or nuregoto acting that he learned from Ikushima Shingoro into the sexiest man alive for 300 years.
Okay.
So he's playing a playboy going to the Yoshiwara pleasure quarters. In fact, he's undercover looking for a sword needed for a vendetta. He's Sogagoro, actually looking for the sword. Um, the play itself is kind of static. It's got all them aragoto or ritualistic elements to it, but it's full of slapstick. I mean, he goes around actively provoking fights with whoever he meets, and it's kind of dumb, but that's kind of kabuki, the essence of kabuki in my world. My world. But the thing about kabuki is it's less about the play; it's more about the actors.
So that actually is a perfect point to bring up, because I was
Mm.
about to ask about the acting itself. You
Yeah.
mentioned earlier that some of these people invented specific ways of acting. Is it all kind of structured, like in terms of the movements, like facial expressions? Are they codified and people need to follow those, and each facial expression means something? Or do the actors have like freedom of interpretation of how they want to convey an emotion?
There are, I mean, in the beginning, sure, there was freedom of interpretation, but yes, there are these parts, the predefined parts called kata. I mean, they exist in all traditional performing arts. It enables the actors to practice the various parts and then combine them to create, for example, new roles or create new expressions. And it's kind of time saving, because if everybody practice the same kata, you don't need to practice together that much.
I see.
Like, for example, no performers, they only come together on the day and perform, and then they
Really?
because
They never rehearse together.
amateurs certainly do, but professionals are not, as far as I know.
Interesting.
And also kabuki performances, except for really really new shows, I mean, they practice once and then it's go.
Wow.
So, and that means this is only possible because you have the predetermined parts. But within these parts, there are, of course, certain ways of doing it, and then they have to be filled with content, which there are variations of how to do it. Some of these kata have specific meanings. Some are just there for visualization. I mean, the physical language of well, not only kabuki but also actually no, or well, the puppet. Well, let's leave those about. It's actually genderless. It doesn't matter. The biological sex of the performer is irrelevant in these performance arts. The role that's supposed to be acted, the gender of the role that is being enacted, consists of kind of is written by a physical grammar. So you become the part that you are acting becomes a woman if it follows the physical grammar of female movements. Or it becomes male when it performs along the lines of the physical grammar of male movements. So yeah, I mean, hence the Onagat actors, but also, I mean, for example, in Nihonbuyo, which kind of stems from kabuki acting, you have a lot of male specialists who are women, and also in the Meiji period when like. Okay, this is getting complicated and I'm getting away from your question, but I may come back to what I was now thinking about a little bit later, but let's not go there just now. So yes, they are. And some of them are just there to kind of make up for the femininity. And a lot of this physical grammar is actually stolen from the Bunraku puppets. Because a puppet, an inanimate object, needs to make a Super Bowl. It needs to exaggerate the essence of what it is trying to express in order to make it lifelike. So it becomes kind of goes over. It's kind of a super realism going on. It supersedes the actual natural movements of humans and therefore becomes believable. And that is then also what kabuki actor does physically. So, but some of the movements, for example, there is this the facial movements. There is this glare. It's an expression of power. When kabuki actors performs this, you know that they are now feeling a strong surge of rage or of energy of power. That's when they cross their eyes voluntarily, and this is called a nirami. And it's a power expression used in aragoto acting, and this is actually a physical mimicking of the Buddhist deity Akala.
Okay.
The Akala deity has his eyes crossed like this because he can see in all realms. He also has one tooth going up and one going down because his power reaches all realms. And kabuki, I mean, here's the thing with acting. In order to convey what you're trying to say, it must be recognizable to the audience. So when kabuki acting developed, when they kind of wanted to show strength, they mimicked things that the audience already knew were strong, such as the diva kings from the Buddhist statues or the Akala deity. That the audience would know, oh, that's strength. He's powerful if they saw that. So a lot of the physical, I mean, the movements is actually mimicking like the Buddhist deities too. And the Nirami glare is also something, well, to go back to Danjuro II, when he was in Osaka in 1742, he had a great success with enacting the Akala deity on stage. That's a part of the famous 18 acts, the Kabuki Hachiban of the Danjuro family today still. And he had a huge success with the play. He enacted a lot of different things too, but the Fudomyo, the Akala enactment became so popular that people came not only from Osaka, they came from Kyoto, they came from the surrounding countryside to see it. And one day in the summer, it was really hot, and they had a day off. So some of the actors, they went for a stroll in the countryside, and they took a break at a tea house. And there, the tea house owner came and asked Danjuro II, please, could you perform the Nirami glare for my daughter? She's very ill. She's got malaria. She's got a fever. Because the rumor had it that Danjuro's glare could scare away the demons that were causing the fever. I mean, you believe that you have the saying "okori ga ochiru" still today in Japan. So,
Mhm.
and he said, "No, no, I mean, I'm too old. I can't do that anymore." Blah blah blah. But he was eventually convinced to do it, and according to urban legend, he actually managed in.
Ah.
This is an urban legend created about 60 years after his death. So, whether these things actually did happen when he was in Osaka is to be taken with a lot of salt, I believe. But I mean, what actually did happen is that when he traveled to Takao, Mount Takao, west of Tokyo, there is a Fudo shrine there, or a Fudo temple there, and they made a picnic on the temple grounds, and the temple owner came and saw this famous actor from Edo there. They were in the 60s, so he was already very well established and
Mhm.
very famous, and asked, couldn't you please show me the foot of your the glare? And they were like, nah, I mean, we're here on holiday, we don't want to work. But then after a few
Drinks.
drinks, yeah, well, let's do it. And here, I mean, it wasn't that anybody was cured and whatever, but all the people who had gathered to see the famous actor from Edo came. They saw this and they went like, oh, as they would be praying to deity and were throwing money to them, like as they would have been at a temple. So some of the parts do have, I mean, to the early modern audience in mind, they have this kind of magic dwelling within it. Actually, not only the physical acting, but prints of actors were sold as kind of medicine. They were supposed to protect you from the measles. They were supposed to protect you from smallpox. So people believed that there was a magic in kabuki actors.
Which certainly contributed to their financial success.
Yes, I don't think that anybody would have like contradicted the potential magic happening there.
A few centuries of history, a lot of plays, a lot of things to talk about. Where does your research interest lie today? You started with Danjuro II. Are you still studying him, or have you kind of also found some other niches within kabuki that fascinate you?
Yes, I mean, I do still work on the diary. I did this kind of general, like the essence of what I can read from the diary concerning the management of the theaters and the production of theaters. But now I'm kind of annotating it to really know what daily life in Edo was at the day. And this is slow process. Then I'm reading, I'm kind of investigating kabuki from the perspective of the consumer by trying to read the very extensive diary of Yanagisawa Nobutoki. He was a feudal lord he's from Nara area, from Yamato, Koriyama. His kind of castle is still there for those who want to go visit. And he was today he would be one of these people who updates his blog 3 times a day. He writes so much in his diary. It's exhausting, but from there I try to pick up pieces which mentioned the process behind first of all his dealings with the theater tea houses, because it's not only the theaters, there are collateral businesses dependent or codependent with the theaters. And these businesses very often come to the feudal lord's estate bringing gifts and bringing flyers. And they also go sometimes not to the theater, just to the tea houses. So
the Shibai Chaya.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm looking at the relationship between like the gastronomic businesses surrounding the theaters and these patrons on the one hand, and then at the amateur performances, because the Shibai Chaya, they provided material for these amateur performances too. So I'm looking at these private venues, and here especially the role of the female performers.
Mm-hmm.
Because female performers disappeared from the commercial kabuki or the public commercial theaters in 1629. But professional female kabuki performers existed in private venues such as the Edo Castle and the feudal lord mansions. Very often, these girls, these women, would be born from kabuki families. They would be the sisters, the mothers of kabuki actors. But they made good money there, and I'm looking at kind of this private and then also this private branch, and then also the importance of the female performance within this network. That's kind of still, sorry, this is kind of still related to the diaries and then the production of plays. But then I have a kind of a new branch. I'm looking into the historiography of kabuki, meaning how was the history of kabuki itself written? Because there are several, like, as you all know here, um, history isn't equal the past. Or, I mean, a lot of things in the past disappear from history because they aren't recorded. But then things that are recorded also need to be interpreted. And this interpretation is what we now call history. And kabuki, the world of kabuki, started telling its own history around about the end of the 18th century. A lot of books printed for the fans of kabuki were telling like the origins of kabuki. And here the historically well recorded so-called founder of kabuki, Okuni, plays a very minor role. I've looked at least 40 publications. She appears 3 times as a rand note.
Because from the couple of articles and videos that I watched before you came today, it all starts with her.
Yeah, and it does. But these commercial publications being brought out or how shall we say, produced by the world of kabuki itself and their collaborating publishers, they started first in the Age of the Gods, because that's what Zeami does in Fushikaden, in the Age of the Gods, and then it came from China or from India, and then it came to Japan. And then suddenly Saruvaka Kansaburo, the first Nakamura-sa owner, gets his license from the government. So they stress very much that it is that the licenses come directly from the bakufu, and then they print genealogies. This family has continued for 18 generations. This family has continued for 7 generations. This family has continued this lineage for so and so many generations. They stress very much its respectability as merchants with a proper business license from the bakufu. Now, in the Meiji period, by the late early modern period also, collectors and researchers, kind of scholars, start collecting and compiling primary sources in which Okuni appears, in which we have the early wakashu performers, etc., who are almost never mentioned in these publications from the world of kabuki itself. So in the Meiji period, the history of kabuki gets kind of rewritten as the performance art of the outlaws, of the downtrodden classes, of the proletarian classes. I've even seen in one case. And the world of kabuki casts itself as having always been at loggerheads with the bakufu, which they were. That's true. I mean, there was so many court cases. There were so many instances where the bakufu came and like put restrictions on the performances. But they stress the fact that they were kind of a culture much more after the Meiji Restoration, because then everything that's is kind of supported by the bakufu.
Fell apart.
Yes. So the writing of history itself changed over time, and I'm now looking at this particular process.
No easy task.
No, and there is it's a never-ending task because it continues
to be rewritten.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of this is things I like to talk about. It's things that are really hard to prove, find hard proof. So I have my diaries for that. But this historiography, the narrative of how the history of kabuki was created, I have it as kind of a side project.
How is the interest in Kabuki today? Is it something that is kind of stable, on the rise? It was in decline for the period after the war, but with what you mentioned earlier, Super Kabuki, and now these interpretations of popular anime into Kabuki, I imagine there's a bit more. Where does it leave this form of theater today?
Difficult to say. I mean, it has ups and downs. When the new Kabuki theater opened in Tokyo, up until 2 years before the COVID pandemic, more or less, they sold out on a regular basis. But then, kind of the interest kind of wane, and then there came the COVID, and it took surprisingly long time for the world for the theatrical world in general to bounce back. Right now, there's been a bit of a generation shift. We had the Shumei of Danjuro in 2022, and now we have the Shumei of Kikugoro. And my guess is that we're going to have the Shumei of Kansaburo pretty soon.
Shumei meaning?
Sorry. Shumei meaning, as kabuki actors still today, they pass on their names to their sons. So you have a childhood acting name, and then you have a youth acting name, and then you have the acting name that the main acting name that you get when you are the leader of your acting house, and then you have kind of a retirement acting name. That's the usual progression. So when you get to a certain stage in your career, your family, your peers, Shochiku agreed, now it's time for you to take on the big name. And during these kind of name-taking seasons, special performances, which usually draw large crowds, it attracts them. So Shochiku, of course, places these kind of shumei events at reasonable intervals. But taken together right now, also with the film Kokuho, I can't stress this enough, that it has created an interest among my students and young people to this kind of interest may be superficial and may wane or fade out soon. I don't know. But right now, I don't think it's too bad. I mean, Shochiku is interested in producing and experimenting with new techniques again, and the actors are interested in doing that. And there is a general enthusiasm among the people who are creating it right now, I feel.
So for people interested, they can go and check the performances in Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, and some other theaters throughout Japan, maybe some local troupes as well.
Yes.
Tove, thank you so much for coming for these fascinating insights. Do you feel like we covered the world of Kabuki pretty well, or is there something that we didn't talk about that you think we still need to touch upon?
Yeah, I feel I've spoken way too much, but yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing that I usually say to my students, both Japanese and foreign students. Kabuki is easy. Don't overthink it. Just go and see it. And again, if you don't understand everything, that's not the end of the world. Especially my Japanese students tend to be very nervous about not understanding, as if 100% as if they would be failures if they don't understand 100% of what's going on. That's not it. You understand what you understand. I mean, relax, take it as art. It is. Yeah, it is. Basically.
Thank you very much, Tove Bjoerk. We'll make sure that people can find you and your work and your many interesting articles you've written about Kabuki, so that if they have questions and want to learn more about Danjuro II or other aspects of Kabuki, maybe they can check that. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sticking with us all the way till the end. We really appreciate it. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the podcast. It helps us improve the show and bring you more in-depth conversations from Japan. Take care and see you next time.